She was lying in a hospital bed, barely breathing, connected to machines that were the only thing keeping her alive, and the man she loved, the man she'd been trying to tell the truth to for months, walked into that room, looked her in the eyes, and called her a liar. 5 seconds later, her heart stopped. This is the story of a woman who almost died trying to be believed, and a man who almost lost everything because he was too broken to listen. If you've ever loved someone who refused to see your pain, this one's for you. Before we start, I just want to say, if you're here, it's because stories like this one mean something to you, and that means something to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that button, turn on notifications, because every story I tell here is made for people like you, people who feel things deeply and aren't afraid to sit with it. All right, let's get into this one. And trust me, you're gonna want to stay till the end. The fluorescent lights in room 314 of St. Andrew's Memorial Hospital buzzed the way they always did, that low electrical hum that got under your skin after the first hour and never left. A sound you stopped noticing until everything else went quiet, and then everything else went quiet. The heart monitor had been beeping steady for the last 40 minutes. Slow, weak, but steady. The little green line going up and down like it was barely hanging on, but hanging on. Claire Beckett was lying there, skin so pale it almost matched the hospital sheets, her lips cracked, her hair pushed to one side, IV tubes running from both arms, and her eyes, those washed-out blue eyes that always looked like they were carrying something they couldn't put down, were open, looking right at him. Nathan Caldwell was standing at the foot of the bed, with his jaw set and his fists clenched inside the pockets of a coat that cost more than Claire's rent. He hadn't sat down, hadn't touched her, hadn't asked the nurse a single question about her condition. He'd walked into that room the way he walked into boardrooms, already decided, already armed. "You're lying," he said, not yelling, worse than yelling, that low, controlled voice he used when he was done, when the conversation was already over in his head and he was just letting you know. Claire blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers, thin, the nails bitten down, a faded bruise from a blown IV on the back of her left hand, curled around the edge of the blanket. "Nathan, no." He held up a hand. "I've seen the act before. The tears, the tests, the whole thing. My mother did this for 15 years, Claire. 15. So whatever this is, whatever you're trying to... Nathan, there's something I need to tell you. The doctors found..." "Stop!" He cut her off. Flat. Final. The way you close a door you never plan to open again. "I don't want to hear it. Whatever new story you've got, whatever they told you, whatever you're about to say to make me stay, save it. Please, just listen to me. You're a liar, Claire." He said it the way you'd read a fact off a spreadsheet. No heat, no hesitation. Just 4 words, delivered like a verdict. She opened her mouth. One more try, one last chance to say the thing that would change everything, but the words never came out. And then the monitor flatlined. One long, unbroken tone. A straight green line cutting across the screen like a blade. Claire's eyes rolled back. Her body went still. And for a second, maybe 2, maybe 5, Nathan couldn't tell because time had just stopped making sense. There was nothing in that room except that sound. That awful, endless, screaming sound. Then the door burst open. 2 nurses. Then a doctor. Then another nurse. Someone shouted a code. Blue, he thought, but his brain wasn't processing words anymore. Someone pushed him. Hard. His back hit the wall. He saw hands on Claire's chest, heard someone say charging and then a thud that made his stomach turn. Nathan Caldwell stood there with his shoulders pressed against the wall of room 314 and watched 5 strangers fight to bring back the woman he'd just called a liar. The woman who'd been trying to tell him something. Something he'd cut off, something he'd refused to hear. The woman who'd been telling the truth about everything, the sickness, the pain, the fear, and he hadn't believed a single word. The radiator near the window clanked once, loud and sudden, like a slap. 4 minutes and 21 seconds. That's how long it took. When the beeping came back, unsteady, fragile, but there, Nathan's knees buckled. He didn't fall, but his hand shot out and grabbed the doorframe, and he held on like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't see the bottom of. The lead nurse turned around, looked at him. Her face was flushed, her scrubs wrinkled, a pen clipped crookedly to her pocket. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The look said everything. "You shouldn't be here." Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at Claire. Her chest was moving again, barely. The color hadn't come back to her face. Her eyes were closed now. The oxygen mask they'd put on her fogged and cleared, in a rhythm that felt like the most fragile thing in the world. And Nathan thought, not in words, not in sentences, but in that deep animal part of the brain that understands things before the rest catches up, that if she had died, the last thing she would have heard on this earth was him calling her a liar. Claire Beckett didn't grow up in the kind of house where people talked about feelings. She grew up in Lewiston, Maine, in a second-floor apartment above a laundromat on Lisbon Street. The machines ran until 10, sometimes 11, and the whole floor vibrated. This low, constant tremor that got into the walls, the dishes, the bed frame. She slept with it every night until she was 18. Years later, in Portland, she'd sometimes wake up at 2 a.m. in her silent apartment and feel wrong, like the world had stopped moving. Her mother, Susan, worked the register at a shop and save from 6 to 2 and cleaned offices downtown 3 nights a week. She was a small woman with rough hands and a laugh that came easy when things were good and disappeared completely when they weren't. Claire's father left when she was 4. No letter, no phone call, no custody fight, just a man who was there on a Tuesday and gone on a Wednesday, leaving behind a closet half empty and a daughter who'd spend the next 27 years trying not to be too much for anyone. Susan got sick when Claire was 18, an autoimmune condition, the kind that attacks the lungs, the joints, the blood. Systemic, aggressive, stage 3 by the time anyone caught it, because Susan was the kind of woman who didn't go to the doctor until she couldn't ignore it anymore, and even then she apologized for taking up their time. The insurance she had through the grocery store covered the basics, if you could call what they offered basic. The specialist at the county hospital was a tired man who saw too many patients and remembered too few names. Claire watched her mother shrink, watched the weight drop, the hair thin, the breathing get worse. She dropped out of college, community college, the one on Westminster Street where she'd been studying pre-nursing, and moved back into that apartment above the laundromat. She slept on the couch for 6 months, heated soup in the microwave at the hospital when she could, ate vending machine crackers when she couldn't, watched nurses come and go, learn their rhythms, their shortcuts, the way they softened their voices when things were bad. She noticed which ones remembered her mother's name and which ones didn't. Susan died on a Sunday morning in March. Claire was 19. She was holding her mother's hand when it happened, the monitors slowing, the breathing getting further apart, the room going still. A nurse came in 3 minutes later and touched Claire's shoulder and said something about being sorry. Claire nodded, thanked her, walked to the parking lot, sat in her mother's car, a 2003 Civic with a cracked windshield and a passenger seat covered in receipts, and stared at the steering wheel until the sun went down. She didn't cry, not that day, not the day after. The tears came 3 weeks later in the shower, at 6 a.m. when she was getting ready for a shift at the diner where she'd picked up work. They came without warning, and they didn't stop for 20 minutes. She sat on the floor of the tub with the water going lukewarm, then cold, and she let it happen. Then she got up, dried off, went to work. That was Claire. That was always Claire. You get hit, you get up, you keep going. You don't ask for help because nobody's coming. You don't complain because nobody's listening. You make yourself small, you make yourself useful, and you pray that's enough. She finished nursing school 3 years later, partial scholarship, student loans she'd be paying off until she was 40, got hired at St. Andrew's Memorial in Portland, Oregon, a big hospital, good reputation, impressive on a resume, even if the break room smelled like burned coffee and the supply closet was always short on gloves. She was good at the job. Patients liked her. Quiet, attentive, she remembered your name, your kid's name, whether you took your coffee with sugar. The doctors appreciated her. The administration barely knew she existed. She worked her shifts. She picked up extras when she could. She went home to a 1-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, the one on Hawthorne, above the vintage store that played music too loud on weekends, and she ate dinner alone and fell asleep with the TV on. And nobody, not her co-workers, not her neighbors, not the woman at the coffee shop on Division Street who knew her order by heart, knew that Claire's body was starting to fail, the same way her mother's had, the same fatigue that didn't lift, the same joint pain that moved around like it had its own schedule, the same test results that came back a little worse each time. Claire kept it to herself, not because she was brave, because she was terrified. Not of dying, she'd made her peace with that a long time ago, but of what came before, of asking for help and being ignored, of showing someone her pain and having them look right through it, of being called a liar. Her phone sat on the bedside table, the screen cracked in the corner. 11:47 p.m. No new messages. The apartment was quiet. The vintage store had closed early. Somewhere down the hall, a pipe groaned. Claire pulled the blanket up to her chin, closed her eyes and tried not to think about the test results sitting in her email that she hadn't opened yet. She opened them at 2 a.m., read them twice, put the phone face down on the mattress. The ceiling had a crack that ran from the light fixture to the corner. She'd noticed it the first week she moved in. Never fixed it. Never would. She stared at it until the sun came up. The man who built walls. Nathan Caldwell's office sat on the 23rd floor of the Caldwell Group building in downtown Portland, right on Southwest Morrison Street, 2 blocks from Pioneer Courthouse Square. Floor-to-ceiling windows, walnut desk that had belonged to his father, a view of the Willamette River that most people would kill for and that Nathan hadn't really looked at, in years. It was a Tuesday, 7:14 a.m. He was already on his second coffee, the first one gone cold on the credenza behind him, the mug leaving a ring on a quarterly report he hadn't finished reading. His shirt was pressed, but the collar was slightly crooked. The dry cleaner on 10th had been slipping lately, and he kept meaning to switch but never did. There was a nick on his jaw from shaving too fast. His tie was loosened already, and the day hadn't even started. The Caldwell Group owned 14 hospitals and medical centers across Oregon and Washington, 3 rehabilitation facilities, 2 urgent care chains, a real estate portfolio that included half a block in the Pearl District and a development in Lake Oswego that the city council had fought over for 18 months. Nathan ran all of it, had been running it since he was 26, when his father, Arthur Caldwell, dropped dead of a massive coronary. Right there in the corner office, fell forward onto the desk, pen still in his hand, mid-signature on a contract that Nathan would end up signing himself 3 days later, at the funeral reception, because the deal couldn't wait. That was 10 years ago. Nathan hadn't taken a vacation since. He was good at this. Good at the numbers, the negotiations, the cold calculations that kept the machine running. People called him brilliant. They also called him ruthless, detached, impossible to read. He'd been on the cover of Portland Business Journal twice. Both times the photographer had asked him to smile. Both times the result looked like a man who'd forgotten how. The women came and went. There was always someone, elegant, appropriate, the kind of woman his sister Meredith would approve of. They lasted 3 months, sometimes 4, and they all ended the same way. The woman wanting more, Nathan pulling back, a clean break that left no mess. He was careful about that, surgical almost, like ending a contract. His assistant, Greg, knocked twice and opened the door without waiting. Greg had worked for Nathan for 6 years and had learned early that Nathan didn't do small talk, didn't want to hear about weekends, and responded better to bullet points than paragraphs. Board call at 8. The St. Andrews audit is on your desk. The financials flagged 2 departments and your sister called. Twice. Nathan didn't look up from his laptop. Which 2 departments? Oncology and general surgery. I'll go myself. Cancel the 10 o'clock. Greg hesitated. That half-second pause that meant he wanted to say something, but was calculating whether it was worth it. What? Nathan said. Meredith said it's important. Meredith always says it's important. Greg left. The door clicked shut. Nathan stared at the screen for another 30 seconds, then leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. The office smelled like leather and old paper and the faint chemical sweetness of carpet cleaner. The building's HVAC had been making a clicking noise for a week. Maintenance said they'd fixed it. They hadn't. He picked up the cold coffee, took a sip, made a face, set it back down. Nathan Caldwell was 36 years old, worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, and hadn't had a real conversation with another human being in longer than he cared to think about. The thing about Nathan's mother was that she was good at it. Patricia Caldwell didn't do anything halfway. When she faked a migraine, she went dark, curtains drawn, cold washcloth on her forehead, speaking in whispers. When she faked a heart scare, she had the whole performance down. The sudden clutch at the chest, the dramatic fall onto the nearest piece of furniture, the ambulance called just in case. When she invented a mystery illness, something the doctors could never quite pin down, something with symptoms that shifted whenever the tests came back normal, she committed, cried real tears, lost weight on purpose, kept journals of her symptoms that she'd leave out where Arthur could find them. Nathan was 8 the first time he understood what was happening. Not fully. He was 8, he didn't have the words for it yet, but he was sitting on the stairs of their house in Dunthorpe, that big white colonial on Military Road, with the circular driveway and the gardener who came Tuesdays, and he heard his father on the phone with a doctor. Arthur's voice was low, tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "She's doing it again," Arthur said. I know she is. But what am I supposed to do? She's my wife." Nathan sat on those stairs with his knees pulled up to his chest and his socks slipping on the hardwood, and something clicked into place in his brain. A switch that, once flipped, never flipped back. His mother was pretending. The awareness grew slowly, the way mold grows, invisible at first, then everywhere. He watched Patricia orchestrate hospital visits the way other people planned dinner parties. Watched her adjust her symptoms based on who was in the room. Watched her cry on cue. Watched his father, a powerful man, a man who ran an empire, shrink a little more each time, until Arthur Caldwell walked through his own front door with the posture of someone expecting to be hit. Patricia left when Nathan was 20, took half of everything. The divorce was quiet. Arthur made sure of that. No press, no scandal. Just lawyers and paperwork and a house that felt bigger than it had any right to. Arthur never talked about it, not once. Not to Nathan, not to Meredith, not to anyone. He just kept working, kept showing up at the office at 6 a.m. and leaving at 9 p.m., kept signing contracts and shaking hands and building things, and then one morning he fell forward onto his desk and never got up. Nathan found him. Nathan found his own father dead at that walnut desk, the same desk that now sat in Nathan's office, the same desk where Nathan kept his cold coffee and his unsigned reports and his carefully maintained distance from every living thing. And somewhere deep inside Nathan Caldwell, in that locked room where he kept the things he'd never say out loud, lived one unshakable truth. Women who cry in hospitals are liars. Always. Every single time. No exceptions. He didn't know it was a wound. He thought it was wisdom. 9 months before room 314, Nathan drove to St. Andrew's Memorial for a routine audit. He didn't usually go himself. He had people for that. A team of analysts who reviewed the numbers, flagged the problems, sent reports he'd skim on his tablet during his morning coffee. But that quarter, oncology's numbers were off, and Nathan didn't trust reports. He trusted his own eyes. He arrived at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, parked in the reserved spot near the east entrance, the one that was always half blocked by the delivery truck from the linen service, and walked through the automatic doors with his coat over his arm and that look on his face. The one that made receptionists sit up straighter and administrators suddenly remember where they'd left their files. He moved through the building the way he always did, fast, focused, already cataloguing. The lobby carpet was worn near the elevator. The waiting room TV was playing some daytime talk show with the volume too low to hear. A kid was crying somewhere down the hall, that hiccuping, exhausted kind of crying that meant he'd been at it for a while. Nathan took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Oncology. He was halfway down the corridor when he saw her. She was sitting on the floor, right there on the linoleum, back against the wall, between a supply cart and a fire extinguisher. Knees up, arms wrapped around them. A cup of coffee in one hand, paper cup, the kind from the break room machine, the coffee that tasted like hot water, with a vague memory of beans. Her scrubs were wrinkled. There was a stain on the left knee, something dark, could have been anything. Her hair was in a messy bun that was coming undone on one side, and she was crying. Not loud, not dramatic, not the kind of crying that's meant to be seen. This was the quiet kind, the kind where the shoulders shake but no sound comes out, where the tears just run and the person doesn't wipe them because they've stopped caring who notices. Nathan stopped walking. His shoes, Italian leather, $600, the ones that clicked on hospital floors in a way that announced him before he rounded any corner, went silent. He should have kept going. He was there for numbers, not for this. He had a meeting with the department head in 20 minutes. He had calls to return and emails to answer, and a sister who'd called twice about something she said was important. He sat down next to her, right there on the linoleum, in his $3,000 suit, next to a supply cart that smelled faintly of antiseptic and rubber gloves. He didn't say anything, didn't introduce himself, didn't ask what was wrong, just sat there, shoulder almost touching hers, and waited. 2 minutes, 3. The fluorescent light above them flickered, that quick, irregular pulse that meant the ballast was going. A phone rang at the nurse's station. Someone paged Dr. Yamada to radiology. Claire wiped her face with the back of her hand, sniffed once, looked at him with those blue eyes that were red now, swollen, the mascara she'd put on 12 hours ago smudged under her lower lashes. "I lost a patient," she said. Not to him, exactly. More to the hallway. to the fluorescent light, to whoever was listening. Mr. Abernathy, he was 73. He liked bad jokes, really bad ones. Told me the same one about a duck every time I checked his vitals. Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together, hard. His daughter was in the cafeteria when it happened. Nathan sat there. The linoleum was cold under his palms. His back was going to hurt later from this position. He could smell the break room coffee, acrid, almost burned, and something else underneath it. Lavender, maybe. Her soap or her shampoo or whatever it was. "You want a real coffee?" he said. "There's a place on Belmont that doesn't taste like this." She looked at him then, really looked at him, not at the suit or the shoes or the posture that said, "I own this building," at him. "I look like a mess," she said. "Yeah," he said. "You do." She almost laughed. It came out as more of a breath, a small, surprised sound, like she'd forgotten that was something her body could do. "Okay," she said. "Yeah, okay." They walked out of the hospital together. It was late September, and Portland was doing that thing it does in fall. The air crisp, the sky that impossible grey-blue, the leaves on the trees along the Hawthorne Bridge just starting to turn. The delivery truck was still blocking the parking spot. A pigeon was sitting on the hood of Nathan's car, like it owned the place. He didn't open the door for her. She didn't wait for him to. The coffee shop on Belmont was small, wedged between a used bookstore and a place that sold crystals. The barista had a septum piercing and a tattoo of a moth on her forearm and made a pour-over that was actually worth the $7. Nathan ordered black. Claire ordered something with oat milk that she held with both hands, warming her fingers. They sat at a table near the window. The chair wobbled. Nathan put a napkin under the leg without thinking about it. They didn't talk about the hospital. They didn't talk about who he was. Claire told him about Lewiston, about her mother, about the laundromat that vibrated the floors. Nathan told her about the building on Morrison Street, about his father's desk, about the clicking noise the HVAC made that nobody could fix. They stayed until the shop closed at 8. Outside, the streetlights were on, and the air had gotten colder. Claire shoved her hands in the pockets of a jacket that was too thin for the weather, a denim thing with a rip at the cuff that she'd clearly been meaning to fix and hadn't. "Thanks," she said, "for the coffee. And the floor thing. The floor thing. Sitting on the floor with me, you didn't have to." Nathan looked at her. The streetlight caught the side of her face. She had a freckle below her left ear that he hadn't noticed before. "No," he said, "I didn't." She turned and walked toward the bus stop on the corner. He watched her go. She didn't look back. Nathan got in his car. The pigeon was gone. The engine turned over and talk radio came through the speakers. Something about a Timbers game this weekend. He turned it off. He sat there for a long time. Long enough that the windshield started to fog. Then he drove home. What grows in the space between? The relationship didn't start with a kiss or a confession or any of the things that make for a good story. It started with coffee, then another coffee, then a walk along the East Bank Esplanade on a Saturday when the rain held off just long enough, then a dinner at a Thai place on Division that Claire loved and Nathan had never been to, the kind of spot with mismatched chairs and menus taped to the wall and a waitress who called everyone on. Nathan picked up the check. Claire let him, but she split it the next time, even though it meant putting it on a card she probably shouldn't have been using. That's how it went. Slow, careful, like two people circling something they weren't sure was safe to touch. Nathan took her to places she'd never been, a restaurant in the Pearl District where the tasting menu had 12 courses and the wine came with a story about the vineyard. A bar on Northwest 23rd, where the cocktails cost $18, and the bartender knew Nathan by name. A jazz night at a hotel downtown, the Sentinel, the one on Southwest 11th, where they sat in leather chairs and listened to a trio play something slow and aching while the ice melted in Nathan's bourbon, and Claire held a glass of wine she was afraid to spill on the chair. She felt wrong in those places. Not unwelcome. Nathan never made her feel unwelcome, just aware of her shoes, which were the only nice pair she owned, aware of her dress which she'd bought at a consignment shop on Hawthorne for $35 and which looked fine, probably, but not like the dresses the other women wore, aware of the gap between her world and his, a gap that seemed to widen every time a waiter called him Mr. Caldwell without being told. But then Claire took Nathan to her world, the food cart pod on Cartwright, where they ate tacos standing up in the rain, Powell's books on Burnside, where they spent 2 hours wandering the Gold Room, and Nathan bought a first edition he didn't need just because Claire said she liked the cover, The bench at the top of Mount Tabor, where you could see the whole city on a clear day, and where Claire told him about her mother and the way the laundromat floors used to vibrate, and the Sunday morning in March when everything stopped. Nathan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes or any of the things that people say when they don't know what to say. He just sat there on that bench with the wind coming in off the east and the city spread out below them, and he listened. And when she was done, when the silence had settled between them like something solid, he said, "I'm sorry you went through that alone." It was the most honest thing he'd said to another person in years, and it scared the hell out of him. 2 months in, and Nathan still hadn't called her his girlfriend. Claire noticed. Of course she noticed. She wasn't stupid. She saw the way he introduced her. This is Claire, without context, without label, without any word that would attach her to him in a way that meant something. She saw the way he kept his phone face down when they were together, the way he never posted anything, the way he never mentioned her when he talked about his week. She didn't say anything, because Claire Beckett had spent her entire life accepting less than she deserved and calling it enough. Because when you grow up with nothing, a half-open door looks like an invitation. They spent nights at her apartment, never his. The place on Hawthorne, the one bedroom above the vintage store. The mattress was a queen that took up most of the room. The kitchen was barely a kitchen, a 2-burner stove, a refrigerator that hummed too loud, a window above the sink that looked out onto the alley where the recycling trucks came at 6 a.m. every Wednesday. The walls were thin enough to hear the couple next door arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. Nathan didn't seem to mind, or if he did, he didn't show it. He'd lie on that queen mattress with the sheets that were clean but not new, and Claire would rest her head on his chest, and for those hours, just those hours, he felt like a different person, someone who didn't have board meetings and quarterly reports, and a sister who called twice a day, someone who could just be still. "Tell me about your dad," Claire said one night. They were in bed, the lamp off, the streetlight outside throwing a stripe of orange across the ceiling. The vintage store had closed early but left their speaker on, and some kind of indie folk was playing, muffled through the floor. Nathan's arm was around her. His fingers had been moving absently through her hair, and they stopped. "Not much to tell," he said. "Liar." She said it lightly, teasing. She felt his body stiffen, just for a second, a flash of tension that ran through him like a current, and then he forced himself to relax. "He worked," Nathan said. "That's what he did. He worked and he built things and he died at his desk. End of story." Claire didn't push. She put her hand flat on his chest, over his heart, and let the silence sit. The music from downstairs changed to something slower. A car alarm went off somewhere on Hawthorne and stopped after 3 cycles. "My mum," Nathan started, then stopped, swallowed. "My mum was... she had these episodes. Medical episodes, except they weren't real. None of them were real." He said it to the ceiling, not to Claire. Like saying it to another person would make it too real. "How long?" Claire asked. "Years, since I was a kid. She'd fake symptoms, go to the ER, the whole thing. Dad paid for specialists, second opinions, treatments for conditions she didn't have, and she'd just..." He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "She'd watch him scramble, watch him worry, watch him rearrange his entire life around her, and she'd just keep going. Nathan, it's fine. It's not fine. It's done." She left. Took half of everything. Dad kept working, then he died. His voice had gone flat. That boardroom voice. The one with no edges. So yeah, not much to tell. Claire propped herself up on one elbow, looked at him in the stripe of orange light. His jaw was set. His eyes were on the ceiling. That muscle in his temple was doing the thing it did when he was holding something back. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Just that. A small, soft thing. And Nathan closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like it had been sitting in his chest for a decade. Neither of them said anything else. The radiator in the corner clanked once, loud enough to make them both flinch, and then settled into its usual ticking. Claire lay back down. Nathan's fingers found her hair again. The music downstairs stopped at midnight. The recycling trucks would come at 6. 3 months in, Claire started getting sick. It began small. A headache that lasted 2 days. Then fatigue, not normal tired, not nurse shift tired, but something deeper, something that sleep didn't touch. She'd wake up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her appetite disappeared. She lost 4 pounds in a week, then 6 in 2 weeks. Her hands shook sometimes when she drew blood, and she'd have to stop and grip the counter until they steadied. She went to her doctor, ran tests. The results came back inconclusive. Inflammation markers elevated, some antibody levels off, nothing definitive. Her doctor recommended follow-ups, more tests, a rheumatologist. Claire scheduled the appointments, went to them alone, sat in waiting rooms with outdated magazines and the muted TV playing CNN, and filled out forms with her mother's medical history and tried not to think about the patterns, tried not to see the lines connecting her to Susan, tried not to hear the diagnosis that no one had confirmed yet, but that hung in the air of every exam room she walked into. She told Nathan, showed him the test results on her phone, sitting on the couch in her apartment, the TV on mute, a plate of pasta going cold on the coffee table. "It's probably nothing," she said, "but they want to run more panels, maybe a tissue biopsy." Nathan looked at the screen, scrolled through the numbers. His face did something, a micro-expression there and gone, too fast to catch. Then that controlled blankness settled back over his features like a shutter closing. "Have you gotten a second opinion?" he asked. "Not yet. The rheumatologist, I know people. I can call someone at OHSU, get you in faster." "Nathan, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to..." "To what?" "Believe me." The words were right there, right on the tip of her tongue. But she looked at his face, that tight, controlled expression, the jaw working, the eyes that had gone from warm to analytical in the space of a breath, and she swallowed them. "Nothing," she said. "Yeah, call your person at OHSU. That'd be great." He called, got her an appointment, drove her there himself, sat in the waiting room on a plastic chair scrolling through his phone, while Claire got poked and prodded and asked the same questions she'd already answered 3 times. On the drive back, he didn't ask how it went. Claire watched Portland slide by through the passenger window, the Fremont Bridge, the smokestacks of the industrial district, a homeless camp under the overpass that she'd driven past 100 times without really seeing. "It went fine," she said, even though he hadn't asked. "Good," he said. The car was a black Audi that still smelled like new leather, and the pine air freshener that dangled from the rearview mirror, the only imperfect thing about it, that little tree that didn't belong. Claire stared at it the whole ride home, the little green tree spinning slowly from the motion of the car. Nathan dropped her off, didn't come up, said he had a call. Claire walked up the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, kicked off her shoes by the mat. The apartment smelled like the pasta that was still sitting on the coffee table from 3 hours ago. She picked up the plate, scraped the food into the trash, washed the plate by hand because the dishwasher had been broken since November, and her landlord kept saying he'd send someone. She stood at the sink and stared out the window at the alley. A cat was sitting on the dumpster lid, cleaning its paw. The recycling bins were overflowing again. Her phone buzzed. Nathan. "Hope the appointment went well. Talk tomorrow." She read it twice, put the phone on the counter, didn't respond. It got worse. The biopsy results came back. Not inconclusive this time. The rheumatologist wanted more imaging, and the antibody panels had come back positive for markers that pointed in a direction nobody wanted to go. Claire's energy was dropping faster now. She called in sick to work twice in 1 week, something she'd never done in 4 years at St. Andrews. She lost more weight. Her clothes didn't fit right anymore. The scrubs that used to be snug were loose in the shoulders, the waist. She told Nathan. Again. Showed him the new results. Explained what the rheumatologist said. Used the words monitoring and follow-up and precautionary, because those were the words the doctor used and they sounded less terrifying than what she was actually feeling. Nathan listened, or he appeared to listen. He was sitting at the kitchen counter in her apartment, jacket still on, car keys in front of him like he was ready to leave at any moment. His coffee sat untouched. She'd made it the way he liked, but the mug just sat there, steam curling, and then not. "Okay," he said when she finished. "So what's the next step?" "Another scan. And they want to..." "Claire." He looked at her. That look, the one that felt like a closed door. "Are you sure about all this?" "Am I? What do you mean, am I sure?" "I mean, have you considered that it could be stress? You work long shifts. You don't sleep enough. Nathan, I have test results. I have a rheumatologist telling me..." "My mother had test results too." The sentence landed like a fist on the table. Not loud, not angry, just heavy and final. Claire stared at him. Her hands were on the counter, palms down, and she could feel the cold of the laminate through her skin. The kitchen light flickered. It did that. The wiring in this place was ancient, and for a second his face was in shadow. "I'm not your mother," she said. He didn't respond. He picked up his keys, stood up. The jacket rustled, that expensive fabric sound, the one that whispered money even when nothing else did. "I gotta get back," he said. "Early meeting." "Nathan." I'll call you. The door closed. Not slammed. Nathan never slammed doors. Just pulled shut, firm, with that quiet click that somehow felt louder than any slam. Claire stood in the kitchen. The coffee she'd made him sat on the counter, still full, going cold. The light flickered again. The cat from the alley meowed, that thin, insistent sound that meant it wanted in somewhere it didn't belong. She picked up the mug, poured the coffee down the sink, watched it spiral down the drain. Her hands were shaking again. The Flatlined Meredith Caldwell called 3 times on a Monday morning. Nathan ignored the first 2. The third time, he picked up because Meredith would absolutely show up at his office in person if he didn't answer, and he didn't have the energy for that today. "We need to talk about your situation," she said. No hello. Meredith never said hello. "I don't have a situation. You're sleeping with a nurse at one of our hospitals, Nathan. That's a situation." Nathan leaned back in his chair. The HVAC clicked. The river was grey through the window, the colour of old silverware. A barge was moving slowly under the Morrison Bridge. "How did you—" "I manage the public-facing side of this family. It's literally my job to know these things." A pause. The sound of a latte being set down on a hard surface. Meredith was probably at that cafe on Northwest 21st she liked, the one with the marble counters and the $8 almond croissants. "She's a nurse, Nathan, at St. Andrews, which we own. Do I need to spell out how this looks? I'm not having this conversation." "Fine, don't have it with me. Have it with the board when someone leaks a photo and the headline reads, 'Caldwell Group CEO in relationship with employee.' That's a fun Tuesday." "Meredith, I'm looking out for you, that's what I do." She hung up. Nathan sat there holding the phone for a long time, staring at the barge on the river. It was carrying something, containers maybe, or lumber. He couldn't tell from up here. Everything looked small from the 23rd floor. The weeks that followed were the worst of Claire's life. Not because of the tests, although those were bad enough. The imaging came back, and this time the rheumatologist didn't use words like monitoring or precautionary. She used words like aggressive and treatment plan and "we'll need to discuss options." Claire sat in the office at OHSU on the Markham Hill campus, in a chair that was meant to be comfortable but wasn't, and looked at the scan images on the screen, the dark spots, the irregular shapes, the visual proof that her body was doing the same thing to her that it had done to her mother. She asked the rheumatologist what the timeline was. The rheumatologist said it was too early to talk about timelines, which was, Claire knew, a timeline in itself. She tried to tell Nathan. 4 separate times over 2 weeks. Each time the conversation hit the same dead end. The first time she texted him the doctor's notes. He responded 40 minutes later, "Let me know if you need anything." That was it. The second time she called. He picked up on the 4th ring, sounding distracted, traffic noise in the background. "Can we talk about this later? I'm in the car." They never talked about it later. The third time, she sat him down at her apartment and laid everything out. The test results. The rheumatologist's recommendation. The family history. Susan, the same patterns, the same trajectory. Nathan sat across from her with his arms crossed, and that look on his face, the one that wasn't anger and wasn't indifference, but was something worse. Disbelief. Not the shocked kind, the deliberate kind. The kind where someone has already decided what they believe, and your evidence doesn't matter. "I just think," he said slowly, "that you should consider the possibility that some of this is anxiety-driven." Claire felt something inside her chest collapse. Not break, collapse. Like a building that had been holding itself up on rusted beams and finally gave out. "Anxiety," she repeated. "It happens. Stress, overwork, fear of, fear of your mother's history repeating. That's a real thing. Psychosomatic symptoms are, get out." "Claire, get out of my apartment, Nathan." He left. She locked the door behind him, slid down it until she was sitting on the floor with her back against the wood, and her knees pulled up, and that feeling, that old, terrible, familiar feeling, rising in her chest, like floodwater. The feeling of screaming into a room where no one could hear her. The 4th time, she didn't try to tell him at all. It happened on a Tuesday. Claire was at work. She'd been pushing through, picking up shifts because she needed the money, and because sitting alone in her apartment was worse than being tired. She was in the staff locker room at 6:47 p.m., changing out of her scrubs, when the room tilted. Not tilted like dizziness. Tilted like the floor had been yanked out from under her. Her vision went white at the edges. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the locker door, cold metal, the combination lock digging into her palm, and then she was on the floor. Somebody was shouting her name. The fluorescent lights above were doing that swimming thing where everything bleeds into everything else. They got her on a gurney. Her blood pressure had dropped. Dangerously, a nosedive that made the machines scream in ways they shouldn't. Her heart rate was all over the place. They rushed her to a room on the 3rd floor, room 314, the one with the buzzing fluorescent lights and the radiator that clanked. The ER doctor paged her rheumatologist. Tests were run, blood drawn, an IV started, and in the middle of all of it, the needles, the monitors, the controlled chaos of a medical team doing what they do, someone found something in Claire's blood work that changed everything. She was pregnant, 7 weeks. Claire lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, and heard the words like they were coming from underwater. Pregnant, 7 weeks. The same body that was failing her, the same body that was trying to kill her, was also growing a life inside it. She put her hand on her stomach, flat. Nothing to feel yet, but there. Nathan got the call at 8:15 p.m. He was at home, the condo in the Pearl District, the one on Northwest 12th with the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kitchen he never cooked in, and the living room that looked like a page from an architecture magazine and felt like no one lived there. He was on the couch with his laptop open, a glass of bourbon on the side table, the Portland skyline glittering behind him like a screensaver. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Caldwell? This is Sarah at St. Andrew's Memorial. We have Claire Beckett in emergency care. She listed you as her emergency contact." The bourbon sat untouched. His laptop screen went to sleep. He drove. The Pearl District to the hospital was 15 minutes this time of night, down Burnside, past the tent camps under the Burnside Bridge, through the industrial blocks where the streetlights were spaced too far apart and the pavement was always wet even when it hadn't rained. He made it in 11, parked crooked in the visitor lot, didn't lock the car, but he didn't go in scared. That was the thing. He didn't walk through those doors with the fear of a man whose partner was in trouble. He walked in angry, jaw tight, shoulders back, that Caldwell posture that said, "I already know what this is." Because in Nathan's head, the story was already written. Claire was sick, or sick. The tests were real, or convenient. And now she was in the hospital, his hospital, at the exact moment when their relationship was fracturing. The timing, in his mind, was too perfect to be coincidence. Patricia would have done the same thing. His mother would have orchestrated exactly this. The dramatic collapse, the emergency room, the phone call designed to pull him back in. It was the playbook, and Nathan knew the playbook. He found room 314, pushed the door open, and there was Claire, pale, tubes, monitors, those eyes. She tried to tell him. She tried to say the words, "The disease is confirmed, it's the same thing that killed my mother, and there's something else, something they found in the blood work." But Nathan was already talking, already decided. He called her a liar, said it cold, said it flat, said it in that voice that didn't shake, didn't waver, didn't leave room for doubt. And the monitor flatlined. There are sounds that live in your body forever. The click of a phone when someone hangs up and doesn't call back. The particular silence of a house after a funeral. The sound of a heart monitor, going from rhythm to nothing. That long, unbroken tone that doesn't stop until someone makes it stop. Nathan would hear that sound for the rest of his life, standing up at 3 a.m. in the shower, in meetings, driving down Burnside with the radio off. It would find him. It would always find him. They brought her back. The nurse with the crooked pen told him to wait in the hall. He waited. An hour. 2. Sitting in one of those plastic chairs that are bolted to the wall, the ones with the seat that's slightly concave from 1,000 people sitting and waiting and praying. A doctor came out. Dr. Franklin Webb, mid-50s, graying at the temples, with a face that had delivered bad news so many times it had developed its own language for it. "She's stable," Dr. Webb said. "The baby's heartbeat is steady." Nathan looked at him. Baby. The word didn't compute. It sat there in the air between them, wrong-shaped, impossible. "She's pregnant," Dr. Webb said, and his voice had a quality to it, careful, measured, like he was watching Nathan's face for something specific. 7 weeks. We confirmed it during the workup." He paused. "We also confirmed her underlying condition, the same autoimmune disorder her mother was diagnosed with. It's real, Mr. Caldwell. It's documented. It's progressing. And the stress she's been under, specifically the emotional distress this evening, nearly killed her and the baby." Nathan sat there, gripping the armrests, and felt every wall he'd ever built crack down the middle. Not break, not fall, crack. The way a dam cracks. still standing, still holding, but the water coming through in thin, unstoppable streams. "Can I see her?" His voice didn't sound like his own. "She's asked that her visitor access be restricted." Nathan blinked. I understand, she's asked." Dr. Webb's face didn't change, didn't soften, didn't harden. It was the face of a man who'd seen this before, who'd seen people hurt the people they loved, and then be surprised when the door closed. "She doesn't want to see me. She needs rest. The next 48 hours are critical." Nathan nodded, a mechanical thing, his body going through motions while his brain tried to reassemble a reality that had just been blown apart. Dr. Webb walked away. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum, that particular hospital squeak that sounded different from every other shoe in the world. Nathan hadn't moved. The hallway was quiet now. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Somewhere, a cart rattled, someone delivering medication or clean sheets or whatever hospitals delivered at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. He pulled out his phone. The screen was bright in the dim hallway. He opened his contacts, scrolled to Claire's name, stared at it. He didn't call. He sat there until 2 a.m., then 3, then 4. A nurse walked past and looked at him, not unkindly but not with warmth either. A janitor pushed a mop bucket down the hall, the wheels squeaking, the water sloshing. The vending machine at the end of the corridor hummed. At 5:17 a.m., Nathan Caldwell leaned forward, put his elbows on his knees, and pressed his hands over his face. His shoulders shook, once, twice, then hard. A shaking that came from somewhere so deep it didn't have a name. He cried the way Claire cried, quietly without sound, like a person who'd been taught that vulnerability was a weapon other people used, and who had just realized at 36 years old, sitting in a hospital hallway with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and a janitor's mop bucket squeaking in the distance, that he'd been wrong. About everything. About his mother. About Claire. About himself. The overhead light hummed, a thin electrical whine that lived in the walls of this place like a pulse. Down the hall, behind a closed door, a heart monitor beeped. Slow, steady, fragile. 2 hearts, beating. He didn't deserve to hear them. He sat there anyway. Chapter 5. The wreckage and the rain. Nathan didn't go home for 3 days. He stayed in that hallway, slept in the plastic chair, or tried to. His back seized up the first night. By the second, his neck had developed a knot the size of a golf ball. He ate from the vending machine, a granola bar that tasted like cardboard, a bag of pretzels that was stale, a cup of coffee from the break room machine that was worse than anything he'd ever put in his mouth, and that he drank anyway, all of it, because the bitterness felt appropriate. His phone filled with notifications he didn't read. 17 missed calls from the office, 8 from Meredith, 2 from a board member he'd been avoiding for a week. Greg texted 4 times, the first one professional, the second concerned, the third borderline frantic, the fourth just, "Are you okay?" Nathan didn't respond to any of it. He wasn't okay. That was the thing, he wasn't okay. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to perform being okay. The machinery that had kept him functioning, the distance, the cold logic that turned everything into a problem to be solved, had stopped working. Something in room 314 had broken it. That sound, that flatline, the image of Claire's eyes rolling back and her body going still, while 5 strangers fought to restart her heart, and his last word to her, "Liar, liar, liar," echoed off the walls like a curse. On the second day, he tried to see her, walked to the nurse's station, asked politely if he could go in. The nurse, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a no-nonsense energy that reminded him painfully of the kind of person Claire would become in 20 years, looked at her screen and said, "She's requested restricted access, family only." He stopped. What was he? Not her husband? Not her boyfriend? He'd never even given her that word. He was the man who owned the building, the man who'd called her a liar while she lay dying. "I'm the father," he said, and the word felt enormous in his mouth, foreign, like a language he'd never spoken. The nurse looked at him over her glasses. "I'll pass along the message." She didn't let him in. Meredith arrived on the 3rd day. Nathan smelled her perfume before he saw her, that signature scent she'd worn since college, something French and expensive that announced her presence the way a trumpet announces royalty. She came around the corner in a camel-colored coat, her blonde hair blown out, her heels clicking on the linoleum with the precision of a metronome. Behind her, half a step back, was a man in a navy suit carrying a leather briefcase. The lawyer. Of course, she brought a lawyer. "Nathan." Meredith stopped in front of him, looked at the plastic chair, the vending machine wrappers, the coffee cup with the ring stain on the armrest. Her lips pressed together, that expression she'd inherited from Patricia, the one that managed to convey disappointment and calculation simultaneously. "You look terrible," she said. "Go home, Meredith. I'm not here for you." She glanced at the door to room 314. "I'm here to handle this." "Handle what?" "The situation. The nurse. She lowered her voice, leaning in. The perfume was stronger up close, cloying. "The pregnancy, Nathan. We need to get ahead of this before it becomes a problem." Nathan looked at his sister, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. The perfect hair, the perfect coat, the perfect posture that said, "I have this under control," and underneath all of it, underneath the polish and the strategy and the family loyalty she weaponized like a tool, was Patricia. Not entirely, not completely, but enough. Enough of their mother's playbook to make Nathan's stomach turn. "Don't go in that room," he said. "Nathan, I mean it, don't go near her." Meredith studied him for a moment. Then she straightened her coat, nodded once at the lawyer, and walked past Nathan toward room 314. He didn't stop her. He should have, but his body was slow. His brain was slow. Everything was slow. 3 days of no sleep and vending machine food and the constant grinding weight of what he'd done. Claire was awake when Meredith walked in. She'd been staring at the ceiling. That was most of what she did now. Stared at the ceiling, listened to the monitors, put her hand on her stomach and tried to feel something. The baby was too small to feel yet, the doctor said. 7 weeks. A heartbeat on the ultrasound. Fast, strong, impossibly small, but nothing she could feel with her palm. Just the knowledge that it was there, that something was growing inside her while the rest of her was coming apart. She looked terrible and she knew it. Hair flat against the pillow, greasy at the roots. She hadn't showered in 3 days, and the dry shampoo the nurse had given her only did so much. Her lips were chapped. The hospital gown had a stain on the collar that she'd stopped caring about. The room smelled like antiseptic and the ghost of someone else's flowers. Lilies, from the patient who'd had this room before her. The scent trapped in the curtains. Meredith walked in like she owned the place, which technically her family did. "Claire," she smiled, the kind of smile that was all teeth and no warmth, like a real estate agent showing a house with foundation problems. "I'm Meredith, Nathan's sister." Claire looked at her, at the coat, at the lawyer behind her, at the briefcase that probably cost more than Claire's car. She didn't say anything. Meredith sat down in the visitor's chair, crossed her legs, adjusted her coat. Every movement deliberate, rehearsed, like she'd practiced this in the mirror. "I think we can both agree," Meredith said, "that this situation has gotten complicated, and I think we can both agree that the best thing for everyone, you included, is to find a clean resolution." "A clean resolution," Claire repeated. Meredith opened her hands, a gesture that was supposed to look open, but felt like a trap. "I'm not here to be adversarial. I'm here because my family has a reputation to protect, and because you, frankly, are in a vulnerable position. Both of those things are true, so let's be adults about this." She paused. "Let the silence do some of the work. What would it take for you to sign a non-disclosure agreement and step away from my brother's life?" The heart monitor beeped. Once, twice. The IV dripped. Claire looked at Meredith Caldwell, this woman who'd walked into a hospital room where Claire had almost died, where her baby had almost died, and opened the conversation with a price tag, and felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not sadness, not fear, not that dull, beaten-down exhaustion that had become her default setting. Anger. Clean, bright, burning anger. The kind that straightened your spine and put iron in your voice. "How much?" Meredith said. "Everyone has a number, Claire." Claire reached for the call button on her bed rail, pressed it, looked Meredith dead in the eyes. "Get out of my room. Let's be reasonable. Get out of my room. Now." The nurse appeared, the one with the reading glasses and the no-nonsense energy. She took one look at the scene, Claire with her jaw set and her hand still on the call button, Meredith standing now with her perfect posture slightly rattled, the lawyer by the door with the expression of a man who'd seen this go wrong before, and said, "Ma'am, visiting hours are—" "She's leaving," Claire said. "They're both leaving." They left. Claire's hands were shaking. The anger was still there, hot and alive, but underneath it was something else, something that felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in months. She'd said no. To a Caldwell, in a Caldwell hospital, with nothing to her name except a hospital gown with a stain on the collar and a baby the size of a blueberry and a body that was trying to kill her. She'd said no. The heart monitor beeped. Steady. The IV dripped. The room settled into quiet. Claire put both hands on her stomach and closed her eyes. Nathan was waiting in the hallway when Meredith came out. He could tell from her face, the slight flush, the tightness around her mouth, the way she was gripping her phone a little too hard, that it hadn't gone the way she'd planned. "She threw me out," Meredith said. Disbelief and something that might have been grudging respect, quickly buried. "Good. Good? Nathan, I know what you were trying to do." He stood up. Everything hurt. His back, his neck, the knot behind his right shoulder blade that had been screaming for 2 days. But he stood up, and he looked at his sister, and something in his face made her take half a step back. "You went into that room," he said, "and you offered the woman carrying my child money to disappear. I was protecting the family. You were doing what Mom would have done." The words hit Meredith like a slap. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The lawyer, still standing behind her, found something fascinating about his own shoes. "That's not fair," Meredith whispered. "None of this is fair." Nathan's voice was low, shaking, just barely, at the edges. The HVAC overhead hummed. A cart rattled somewhere. "She's sick, Meredith, really sick. The same thing that killed her mother, and she's pregnant. And the last thing I said to her, the last thing she heard before her heart stopped, was that she's a liar. Because I was so goddamn busy seeing Mom in every woman who showed me weakness that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." He ran both hands through his hair. It was greasy. He hadn't showered either. His shirt was wrinkled. The collar that had been slightly crooked 3 days ago now fully askew. There was a coffee stain on his right sleeve. He looked nothing like Nathan Caldwell, CEO. He looked like a man who'd been dismantled. "Go home," he said. "Call off the lawyer. And don't come back here." Meredith stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not agreement, not yet, but the beginning of something. Recognition, maybe, of the fact that her brother was standing in a hospital hallway at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, unshowered and unshaven and broken open in a way she'd never seen, and that whatever she'd walked in here planning to do was already irrelevant. She left. The heels clicked down the hallway. The lawyer followed. The elevator dinged. And then it was quiet again. Nathan sat back down. The seat was still warm from where he'd been sitting for 3 days, the vinyl worn smooth, the armrest sticky with a coffee ring he'd stopped noticing. The hallway settled into that late afternoon quiet, where nothing happens and everything weighs twice as much. Nathan leaned his head back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. He needed to fix this. Not the Caldwell way. Not with money, not with strategy, not with the surgical precision that had gotten him through every other crisis. This couldn't be managed. This had to be felt, and Nathan Caldwell didn't know how to feel things without building a wall around them first. But the walls were cracked now. The water was coming through. He pulled out his phone, opened the browser, typed 3 words he'd never typed before in his life. Therapist, Portland, Oregon. The search results loaded. He scrolled past the ads, past the sponsored posts. Found a name, a face, a number. His thumb hovered over the call button. The fluorescent light flickered. The baby down the hall stopped crying. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. A voice answered, warm, professional, neutral. "Dr. Kessler's office, how can I help you?" Nathan opened his mouth, closed it. His throat felt like it was full of something. Not words, not tears. Just this dense, heavy nothing that had been building for 30 years. "I need to make an appointment," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. The receptionist didn't react, didn't pause, just said, "I have an opening Thursday at 3. Can I get your name?" "Nathan," he said. "Nathan Caldwell." He hung up, put the phone face down on his knee. The hallway was quiet. The monitors beeped behind the door. 2 heartbeats. Still there, still going. His hands were shaking. He let them. 8 months later, the therapy office was on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian on Northeast Glissan Street, between a yoga studio and a place that sold houseplants. The stairs creaked. The waiting room had a white noise machine that sounded like a broken fan and a stack of magazines from 6 months ago. The chair Nathan sat in every Thursday at 3 o'clock had a dip in the cushion that had started to feel like his. "Tell me about the monitor," Dr. Kessler said. She said this every few weeks, not because she'd forgotten. Dr. Kessler didn't forget anything, but because the answer changed. Every time Nathan told it, something shifted. A detail got sharper. A feeling he'd buried came up for air. Nathan sat in the chair with the dip in the cushion and looked at the window. It was raining. Of course it was. This was Portland in May, and the rain had a way of just existing here. Not dramatic, not pouring, just present, like a roommate who never left. I heard it before I understood it, he said. The sound, that long, that tone. I'd heard it in movies, you know. Everyone's heard it in movies. But in person it's different. In person it goes through you. It doesn't just hit your ears. It hits your chest, your stomach, your teeth. He paused, rubbed the spot between his eyebrows. His shirt was wrinkled. He'd stopped ironing them on therapy days, a small rebellion against the version of himself that used to treat appearance like armor. And the thing I keep coming back to, he said, is that I heard that sound and my first thought wasn't, she's dying. My first thought was, what if she's not dying? What if this is part of it? I was standing there watching her flatline and some part of my brain, some broken, wired wrong part of my brain, was still asking if it was real. Dr. Kessler didn't react. She never reacted. That was the thing about her. This middle-aged woman with the reading glasses and the cardigan and the office that smelled like chamomile tea and old books. She just sat there and let the words land wherever they needed to land. That's the part I can't forgive, Nathan said. Not the words. The words were bad enough, but the doubt. The fact that even while she was dying, I doubted her. And what do you know now? That it was never about Claire. He said it flat, tired. The way you say something you've only recently learned to be true. It was about my mother. All of it. Every time Claire showed me a test result, I wasn't seeing Claire. I was seeing Patricia. Every time she cried, every time she was vulnerable, every time she needed me, I saw my mother manipulating my father, and I punished Claire for something my mother did. The rain tapped against the window. The white noise machine hummed. I was so afraid of being fooled, Nathan said, that I destroyed the one person who was telling me the truth. Claire's apartment was different now. Not the apartment. She'd moved. Left the place on Hawthorne in her 6th month, when the stairs became too much and the vintage store's weekend music became impossible with the insomnia. She'd found a ground-floor unit in Selwood, on a quiet street near the park. 1 bedroom, a small nursery that she'd painted herself, a soft green, the color of new leaves, with a crib she'd bought second-hand from a woman on Milwaukee Avenue who'd thrown in a box of baby clothes for free. The apartment wasn't perfect. The kitchen faucet dripped, a slow rhythmic tap-tap-tap that she'd learned to sleep through. The heater made a sound like an old man clearing his throat every time it kicked on. The neighbors had a dog that barked at the mailman every afternoon at 2:15 with military precision, but it was hers. Every mismatched mug, every second-hand chair, every book stacked on the windowsill, hers. The support group met on Wednesdays. 7 women in a community center on Hawthorne, different Hawthorne, the part closer to Cesar Chavez, in a room with folding chairs and bad lighting and a coffee maker that produced something barely qualifying as coffee. Women with autoimmune conditions, women with chronic pain, women who'd been told it's in your head so many times they'd started to believe it. Claire sat in that circle every week and did something she'd never done before. She talked about her mother, about the laundromat floors, about the Sunday morning in March, about Nathan and the word liar and the flatline, and the look on his face that she'd seen in the half-second before her eyes closed, that look of absolute horror, of a man watching his own worst fear come true and realizing too late that he'd created it himself. She talked about the baby, about the kicks that started at 5 months, soft, fluttering, like a fish turning in shallow water, about the ultrasound where she'd seen the spine, the fingers, the heart beating fast and strong, about lying in bed at night with both hands on her stomach, feeling the movement and thinking, you're here, against everything, you're here. The disease was being managed. Treatment had started in her 2nd trimester, carefully, cautiously, under Dr. Webb's supervision. The medication made her nauseous for the 1st month. She lost more weight before she gained it, but the numbers stabilized. The scans showed improvement, not a cure. Dr. Webb was clear about that. This was management, monitoring, a long road with no guaranteed destination. Claire was okay with that. She'd been walking long roads her whole life. Nathan's first letter arrived 4 months after the flatline. Handwritten, 3 pages. Plain paper, no Caldwell Group letterhead, no embossed initials, just a man's handwriting that was messier than Claire expected, like he'd pressed too hard on some words and not hard enough on others. She read it at the kitchen table in her Selwood apartment, at 7 a.m. with a cup of decaf that had gone lukewarm, and the faucet dripping its slow rhythm behind her. The dog next door was barking at something, not the mailman. Too early for that. He didn't ask for forgiveness. That was the first thing she noticed. He didn't say I'm sorry and wait for absolution like a man depositing a check. He said what he'd done, named it, without softening it, without explaining it away, without the word "but" appearing anywhere in 3 pages. I called you a liar while you were dying. I did that, not because you gave me any reason to doubt you, but because I was broken in a way I didn't know I was broken, and I let that brokenness hurt the person who least deserved it. I'm in therapy. I go every Thursday. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I have done a lot of hard things, and none of them come close. I'm not writing this to ask you to take me back. I'm writing this because you deserve to know, that I see what I did, that it will never be okay, and that I'm doing the work. Not for you, not for the baby, but because I owe it to myself to stop being the man my mother made me into. Claire read the letter twice, folded it, put it in the drawer next to the stove, the junk drawer, the one with the dead batteries and the take-out menus and the screwdriver she kept meaning to use on the cabinet hinge. She didn't respond. She read it again 2 weeks later, and again a week after that. She memorized parts of it without meaning to, the way his handwriting got smaller toward the bottom of the 3rd page, like he was running out of courage. The baby came in June, a boy, 6 pounds, 11 ounces, born at 4:17 a.m. at OHSU, on a morning when the Portland fog was so thick you couldn't see the Marquam Hill from the parking lot. Claire's labor was long, 14 hours, and complicated by the medication she was on and the condition that had tried to take everything from her. But the baby came out screaming, red-faced, furious, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that worked just fine. The nurse put him on Claire's chest, still wet, still yelling, and Claire looked down at this tiny, impossible person and felt something crack open inside her. Not the bad kind of cracking, not the kind she'd felt in Nathan's kitchen or in room 314. This was different. This was light getting in. She named him Thomas, after no one. A new name for a new start. Nathan wasn't in the room. She hadn't invited him, but she'd told Dr. Webb to tell him when it happened. The text from Nathan came 6 hours later. One line, "Thank you for letting me know. He has a father who will spend the rest of his life trying to deserve him." Claire read it in the hospital bed with Thomas asleep on her chest, his tiny fingers curled around the collar of her gown. The room smelled like antiseptic, and that particular newborn smell, warm, powdery, impossible to describe. The monitor beeped. Steady. 2 hearts, both beating. She closed her eyes. They met for the first time in 5 months on a Saturday in August. Laurelhurst Park. Claire's idea. Public. Neutral. Safe. She sat on a bench near the pond with Thomas in a stroller. He was 2 months old now, bigger, rounder, with Nathan's grey eyes and Claire's stubborn chin. He was wearing a onesie with a stain on the front, sweet potato from that morning, and he was asleep, which was a miracle because he'd been up since 4 a.m. and Claire had dark circles that made her look like she hadn't slept in 2 months, which, honestly, she hadn't. Nathan came from the parking lot on the east side. She saw him before he saw her. He looked different, thinner. The suit was gone. He was wearing jeans and a button-down that wasn't quite tucked in. His hair was longer than she'd ever seen it. There was a coffee in his hand and a look on his face that she'd never seen before. Not the mask, not the boardroom blankness, not the cold control. This was something raw, open, terrified. He sat down, not next to her, on the other end of the bench, leaving 3 feet of space between them, respectful, careful, like a man approaching something fragile and knowing he was the reason it was fragile. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He looked at the stroller, at Thomas. His jaw tightened, not in the old way, not the shutting down, the retreat behind glass. This was different. This was a man holding himself together by a thread and knowing the thread was about to snap. Nathan started, stopped, swallowed. "He's got your mouth. He's got your temper." Screamed for 3 hours last night. The almost laugh again. That small, surprised breath. Nathan set his coffee on the bench between them. It sat there like a border marker. "I read your letters," Claire said. "All 4 of them. He'd sent one a month, each one longer, each one more honest." "I read all of them." Nathan nodded, looked at the pond. A duck was making its way across the surface, leaving a V-shaped wake. Kids were throwing bread from the other side. An old man was reading a newspaper on the bench across the path. An actual newspaper, folded in quarters. "I'm not ready," Claire said. "I want you to know that. I'm not ready to... I don't know what this is. I don't know what we are. I don't know if we're anything. But he..." She nodded at the stroller. "He deserves to know his father, and his father deserves a chance to be better than his worst moment." Nathan's hands were on his knees. She could see them trembling, barely, just enough. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "I'm being honest. After what happened, I don't know if that ever comes back. I know. I need you to hear that. Really hear it. Not the Caldwell version where you hear it and then strategize around it. The real version, where it might never come back and you have to be okay with that." "I hear you." Thomas stirred, made a small sound, not a cry, just that baby noise that means I'm here, I'm shifting. The world is big and confusing. Claire reached into the stroller and adjusted his blanket. Nathan watched her hand, the way her fingers moved, careful and automatic, the way she tucked the edge under his chin. "Can I?" Nathan's voice caught. He cleared his throat. "Can I hold him?" Claire looked at Nathan Caldwell, this man who'd built an empire on control and distance, this man who'd inherited his father's desk and his mother's damage, this man who'd called her a liar in a hospital room and then sat in a hallway for 3 days and cried without sound, the way she'd taught herself to cry. She lifted Thomas from the stroller. He was warm, heavy in that boneless, trusting way that babies are heavy. She held him out. Nathan took his son, held him against his chest with hands that didn't know the right position, arms that were stiff, a posture that said, "I've never done this before, and I'm terrified of breaking something." Thomas squirmed, settled, made that sound again, the small shifting, "I'm here" sound. Nathan looked down at the baby's face. Grey eyes, his eyes, looked up at him without recognition, without judgment, without any of the history that made everything else so complicated. A tear hit the onesie, then another. Nathan didn't wipe his face, just held his son and let it happen. Claire sat on her end of the bench, 3 feet away, the coffee between them going cold. She didn't move closer. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But she didn't leave. The duck finished its path across the pond. The old man turned a page. The kids ran out of bread and started chasing each other around the fountain. Portland did what Portland always does in August. Gave you one of those rare, perfect days where the sky is blue and the air smells like cut grass, and you can almost forget that it rains here 9 months out of 12. Thomas fell asleep in Nathan's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling, the sweet potato stain on his onesie catching the sunlight. Neither of them spoke for a long time. A jogger passed on the path behind them, footsteps soft on the gravel. The old man folded his newspaper and left. 1 year later, Nathan sold the condo in the Pearl District. He bought a house in Selwood, 4 blocks from Claire's apartment. Not next door, that would have been too much, and they both knew it. 4 blocks. Walking distance. Close enough that Thomas could know both his parents. Far enough that Claire could close her door and have her space. They weren't together. Not in the way the word usually means. They were something else, something that didn't have a name yet, something built slowly on Thursday evening dinners and Saturday morning walks, and the gradual, painstaking work of learning to trust someone who'd proven they could hurt you. Nathan came to every doctor's appointment, sat in the waiting room at OHSU with Thomas on his lap and a diaper bag over his shoulder that looked ridiculous against his button-down. He asked questions, real questions, not the auditing kind, the scared kind, the kind that came from a man who'd learned at 37 that asking, "Is she going to be okay?" wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing he'd ever done. Claire's condition stabilized, not cured. She'd stopped expecting a cure, but managed. Steady. The scans every 3 months were routine now, not terrifying. Dr. Webb said the prognosis was good, and Claire believed him, because she'd finally learned to believe good news when it came. She went back to work at St. Andrews. Part-time, 3 days a week. The hospital felt different now, or maybe she felt different in it. She walked those hallways knowing that she'd almost died in room 314, and that she hadn't, and that the woman who walked out was not the same one they'd wheeled in. Meredith sent a gift when Thomas was born, a silver rattle from Tiffany's with a card that said, "Congratulations." No signature, no apology, but no lawyer either. It was sitting on the shelf in Thomas's nursery, still in the box. Claire wasn't sure what to do with it. She left it there, on a Sunday in October, and one of those Portland Sundays where the rain stops just long enough to make you think it might be over, and then starts again, gentle, like it was just catching its breath. Nathan showed up at Claire's door with Thomas's car seat in one hand and 2 coffees from the place on Belmont. "The barista still has the moth tattoo," he said. Claire took the coffee. "Oat milk," he remembered. "Come in," she said. He just went down. Nathan stepped inside. The apartment smelled like the lavender soap Claire used and the faint, sour, sweet smell of baby spit-up that lived in every fabric in the house now. The faucet dripped. The heater groaned. Thomas's monitor crackled softly from the nursery, that low, static hum that meant he was breathing. He was sleeping. He was fine. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Claire had read his first letter. The junk drawer was still there. Dead batteries, takeout menus, the screwdriver. The letters were in there too, all 4 of them folded, the creases soft from rereading. "I've been thinking," Claire said. Nathan waited. He'd learned how to do that. Wait. Not the impatient, agenda-driven waiting of before. Real waiting. The kind where you don't know what's coming and you stay anyway. "I've been thinking that I spent my whole life being afraid of being ignored, of showing someone my pain and having them look right through me. And you did exactly that, the worst thing I was afraid of. You looked at my pain and you called it a lie." Nathan's hands were around his coffee. His knuckles were white. "And I survived it," Claire said. "I survived the worst thing, and so did he." She nodded toward the nursery. "And I'm not sure, but I think that if I can survive that, I can probably survive trying again." Nathan looked at her. His eyes were wet. His whole face was doing something she'd never seen on him before. Not the controlled mask, not the boardroom blankness. This was unguarded, raw, like a man who'd finally stopped performing. "I don't deserve—" "Stop," she held up a hand. "I'm not giving you this because you deserve it. I'm giving you this because I choose to, because Thomas deserves parents who tried, and because I'm tired of being afraid." The faucet dripped. The heater groaned. Thomas made a sound on the monitor, a soft, sleepy murmur that meant he was dreaming about whatever babies dream about. Claire reached across the table. Her hand landed on top of Nathan's. His fingers were cold from the coffee cup. Hers were warm. She didn't squeeze, didn't intertwine, just rested there. A bridge, a beginning. Nathan turned his hand over, palm up. Her fingers settled into the spaces between his. The rain started again outside, quiet, persistent. Portland rain, the kind that doesn't storm, doesn't rage, just shows up and stays, patient and steady until something grows. A message for you. Some people go through life building walls so high they forget there's a world on the other side. And some people go through life banging on those walls, begging to be let in, until their hands bleed and their voice goes hoarse, and they finally stop. Not because they don't care anymore, but because they've learned that you can't love someone into believing you. Nathan called Claire a liar because he was afraid. Claire stopped fighting because she was exhausted, and a heart monitor flatlined because sometimes the universe has to scream before people will listen. But here's what the universe also did. It gave them a second chance. Not a clean one, not a pretty one. A messy, complicated, imperfect one. The only kind that's real. Claire didn't forgive Nathan because he earned it. She forgave him because carrying the weight of what he did was heavier than the risk of letting him try again. And Nathan didn't become a good man because he went to therapy. He became a good man because he finally stopped pretending he didn't need to. Thomas is walking now, unsteady, determined, crashing into furniture, with the confidence of someone who doesn't know yet that the world can knock you down. He has his father's grey eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and a laugh that sounds like the best thing either of them has ever heard. They're not a perfect family. They're not even a traditional one, but they're real, and they're trying. And most days, that's enough. So here's my question for you, and I really want to hear your answer. If the person you loved called your truth a lie, if they looked at your pain and chose not to believe you, could you find it in yourself to let them try again? Or would the door stay closed forever? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every single one.